Well, thank you everyone for joining this workshop today. This is a workshop jointly hosted by Poly and Solutions. We are coming to you to discuss and review strategies to pursue the USDA RUS DLT grant, the Distance Learning and Telemedicine grant. And we have the session today. We also have a session tomorrow. This workshop includes these two sections that will go over the components of the grant. And our whole goal is to give you tips and tricks on how to pursue successfully this application and win these grants. And we also have joining us today Joe Sifke from the school district in Ohio, and he's going to talk about his efforts at Lisbon School District in Ohio to pursue this grant successfully in the recent past. And he's going to talk about how he's been able to leverage this program to help his students and teachers, faculty, and staff, and the community in general in ways that just wasn't available prior to the implementation of the program. So we also have other speakers who will present documents and some information. We hope you enjoy the session. We're going to keep it concise. You can ask questions in the chat. You can raise your hand. I see that we already have some people starting to chat. Just make sure that if you do have those questions, you post them there. You are all muted except for the presenters. So again, we aren't going to be able to hear you, but you can put your question or message in the chat. So we thank you for taking this time that you have in your day to join us. I'm going to turn it over to Joe and have him give an overview of how he has leveraged this grant and how he's taken advantage of this program in the past and the difference that it's made to him in his rural school in Ohio. So thank you so much, Joe, for joining us. We appreciate it. We've developed a relationship over a long period of time. And when we first came to you, you were thinking, what is this program? And why don't you tell us how it's gone since that time?
Sure. Thanks, Kristen. Good morning, everyone on the West Coast. Good afternoon, everyone on the East Coast. About 1 o'clock here, a little after 1 in Ohio. Happy to be here. Happy to talk about the USA RUS DLT grant. It was presented to us. A little bit of background about Lisbon. We are a small school in rural Ohio, Northeast Ohio, an hour from Cleveland, an hour from Pittsburgh. Population of about 5,000 in our town and less than 1,000 students in our district. So the opportunity arose pre-pandemic to talk a little bit about bringing some of the benefits that the RUS DLT grant brings to a small district like ours. So I was intrigued and I was excited to work with some fantastic people to put together a plan to not only help the students of Lisbon, but also to help the families as well. So a lot of the stuff that the DLT grant consists of, it talks a lot about partnerships and a lot about, bringing equipment to these partnerships so that a virtual link can happen. And there's a lot of partners that you can think about. Here at Lisbon, we felt that the social and emotional well-being of our kids was extremely important, along with the physical health. So 3 of the partners that we automatically put at the top of our list to prioritize were a county health department, Akron Children's Hospital, and a county mental health associate. We felt like those partnerships were crucial to the beginning of this journey, and they didn't disappoint. They have been fantastic. We felt like at the school district, we could identify some problems, but there was a disconnect in getting those services to the kids. A lot of times, sometimes the problem lay within the household, and when you are identifying that a kid needed to see a counselor of a professional need and that counselor was not available on site, they had to go to that facility, and And if the parent was somewhat of a concern, then that voyage never happened. So we were looking for an opportunity to link partnerships with social and emotional people with our kids. And the RUS DLT grant allowed us to do that. So that was our top priority. That's how we leveraged some of the thoughts and processes behind our districts moving forward with the problem. From there, it kind of grew, and we developed partnerships with other school districts that allowed us to link up in our Spanish classes and talk to each other. Some competition between, some of the upper level Spanish classes to have some debates in a foreign language proved to be a very, very exciting, and we were able to video those things and bring those to our families. So that was something that they enjoyed. We also partnered with different organizations as well to give somewhat virtual tours to our kids that were unavailable. There's school bus shortage drivers all over the nation to do a trip during the school day sometimes, with transportation can be very daunting. So why not link up and have a virtual tour? Again, this was all done pre-pandemic. So then the pandemic hit and we were way ahead of the game because we were able to have the resources available to us in our district to seamlessly move forward with some of the virtual stuff that is very common these days.
That's great. I was going to mention the fact that we started talking about this prior to the pandemic, and you brought that up. What a crazy wild time that was. We were sitting in your office talking about this, and then everything else happened. But I'm really grateful that you came to join us. If folks have questions for Joe, you can put them in the chat. I also want to remind everyone that this is being recorded. And I also want to introduce Victoria Fine and Shannon Schaefer from Poly, who are joining us to also talk about the objective scoring portion of this. And what I'll remind everyone is that both the folks at Poly as well as here at Solutions, we do this type of outreach to help you, number one, understand, number two, apply successfully for this and many other grants. So our whole point is grant advocacy. So we're helping school districts, hospitals, healthcare systems, higher education, K-12, all the different entities who are eligible for these grants. We try to help build that awareness. That's the first and most important piece of what we do. We just want to make sure that you know what you are eligible for, because some of these programs are very obscure, but of all things, distance learning and telemedicine has become quite important in this day and time. So, excuse me. Sorry about that. So is there anything that anyone else wants to ask from the panel of Joe before we move to a little bit more of the meat and potatoes of the application? Everyone's good? Okay. Joe, again, let me just thank you on behalf of Poly and Solutions. Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate the partnership that we've built with you, and it's really encouraging to see the way that your school district has been able to build those relationships with other partners across the state and even beyond. So, virtual field trips and course and curriculum and the various ways that you've taken advantage of this program is insightful and helpful, and we appreciate you spending time with us today.
Well, thanks. And thanks for the invitation. And, for anyone out there thinking about moving forward or at least a bit hesitant, you got a great group here, and I couldn't be more happy with the relationship that you guys had with us. I couldn't be a bigger supporter, and best of luck to you guys. And if I can be of any help, please don't hesitate to call.
Thanks, Joe. We appreciate that. What we will tell everyone else on this session is that you can also apply again and again. And so, you know, we talk about that with Joe and other districts and other applicants about how they can apply to expand their program or to enhance their program. You don't want to duplicate services, you don't want to repeat what you've done before, but you can expand and enhance your programs and continue to grow. So you can apply for this over and over. So let me move on to Shannon and Victoria. They are going to take over and talk about the scoring criteria and share a little bit of content with us. Thank you so much for joining us, Shannon and Victoria.
Great, thank you, Kristen. Let's see, so I just want to make sure if you have questions along the way, please feel free to pop it in the chat, and we'll have individuals kind of monitoring that chat. So we just want to keep this very user-friendly, and don't wait until the end necessarily. If there's something that comes to mind, please jump in and ask. We're happy to answer questions along the way. But basically, so it's part of a 2-day workshop, and we just want to really kind of give you the guidance and tools to really understand the RUS Distance Learning and Telemedicine Grant. And so for this first day, we're just going to do, introductions about who's who on the team, give you a really nice high-level overview of the opportunity, and then dive into the scoring. And so one of the nice things about this grant is it's scored objectively for a big piece of that. And so that's going to be the focus of the presentation today. Tomorrow, we'll go ahead and jump into the subjective scoring. So that's probably more what you're familiar with if you've worked on federal grants. That'll be more of kind of the narrative piece, and how that's scored, and really kind of tools and strategies to put your best foot forward, so to speak. And then also we'll get into the budget and some other pieces of that application tomorrow to wrap things up. Victoria, could you? Thank you. Okay, so for introductions, I'm Shannon Schaefer, and I am part of the Learn, Design, Apply team. Victoria Fine, who's also one of the presenters today, is my colleague. And so we're part of a larger team that represents basically, every state across the country. We work hand in hand with Jennifer Walker, who's also on the call, but she's not on video today. And she is one of our channel grant managers, as well as Kimberly Newman. So again, we just represent various areas throughout the country. I'm personally based in Lexington, Kentucky, but work with many states across the region. We are Learn, Design, Apply, so we're a grant consulting organization. We do work with technology vendors to help organizations really identify funding opportunities that would be a good fit for them, and then also help them navigate that opportunity. So our team combined has, a very rich and deep history working in the field of federal grants. It's really something that, we get excited about and love to kind of brainstorm with organizations about the opportunities that are out there and how to best navigate. There are no fees for our services because, again, we're partnering with some of these technology organizations. So it's completely, feel free to reach out, in terms of that initial consultation and services like we're providing today. No strings attached. And then as far as, services provided, one of the things that really appealed to me kind of when I've worked in the world of federal grants my entire career and came to work for Learn, Design, Apply in 2017. And one of the things that really appealed to me was it truly is full service, kind of from the front end to the back end. And I know the solutions team is absolutely the same way. So we enjoy getting to know organizations kind of on the front end, identify needs, but also, 2 years from now, after maybe you've been funded and there's a question about some of the paperwork, our team is always here to help you kind of answer questions, again, provide any information and help you navigate that. So that's a little background about who we are. And then I don't know, we probably want to skip past this.
For smaller workshops, we sometimes have you introduce yourselves, and we would love to hear from you. If anyone wants to chat in, maybe a quick introduction of, the organization that you work for and your familiarity with the grant, we would love to see that, but I know it's a larger group, so we'll skip from this.
Skip that one. Just in the interest of time. Yes, thank you, Victoria. So I'm just going to kind of go into an overview of the grant, the basics. So this one is, RUS DLT, lots of acronyms, right? So it's the Rural Utility Services, which is actually a division of the USDA, and it's the Distance Learning and Telemedicine Grant. So this is one that you can apply for just distance learning, you can apply for just telemedicine, or you can apply for both in one application. So it really is, obviously it's a technology, focused grant. It is one that it's out there to kind of bridge that digital divide. And we'll get more into kind of the specifics of that. But I always tell organizations to kind of think pre-pandemic model too, for what you're thinking of for distance learning and telemedicine. This one, so we know that this one, comes out every year. It's an annual opportunity. It's very consistent. And so this is one that doesn't change a lot year to year. So you can absolutely start any time in the year to plan for this one, and start working with, our team, solutions team, to identify, what your needs are, what your scoring would look like, et cetera. The key to this one too, just kind of again, the basics. So you're thinking pre-pandemic model, but also thinking it's real live interactive learning or telemedicine. So bridging that digital divide and providing resources to end users in real time and the interactive component. So we'll get into more brainstorming, but again, not really thinking in terms of like recorded video, et cetera. Another kind of unique thing about this grant is almost any type of organization is eligible to apply. So even for-profit organizations we've worked with successfully to apply for this one. And then, the formal and informal consortium. So another, I think, nice aspect of this grant is you can apply as a solo organization, you can apply as an informal consortium, you can have partner organizations, but there are no legal parameters around having an MOU in place or anything like that. So again, lots of flexibility with this grant. So the details, project design and scoring. So really, and Victoria's going to go into more detail about the scoring, but you really kind of where we like to start, with organizations is obviously what is the project? So what is your need? So you really want to think again, when we delve into the scoring, you'll see that they're really looking for those end users that are located in rural communities that have high economic need. And that's really the key to the objective scoring and determining how competitive your application is going to be. But you want to think about, okay, so is that organization me, or maybe I'm the urban organization that wants to connect with, the rural end users. But regardless, that's the whole idea of connecting kind of the hub with the resource to the rural end user with economic need. The sites that are scored are only those end user sites. And again, there are some special consideration points that come around from year to year, and Victoria will get more into that piece as well. As far as the budget and expenditures, so it's a 3-year project period, which lends lots of flexibility. Again, this could be something you roll out day one. It could be something that you roll out over 3 years, but that really allows you kind of the opportunity to dream big and really brainstorm, about here's maybe the initial idea, but how do we grow that? The award size is between, usually the minimum request has been $50,000 historically, and allows for up to $1 million in a federal request. There is a 15% match component. So this is a reimbursable grant, but it does require that 15% match of the federal request. Combined, if you take the federal request plus your match, that's the total project budget, and really it's about 13% of that number. So as far as the investment for your organization, I mean, that's really hard to beat. And then the timing of this. So historically, this grant has been around for a long time. Historically, it has come out in the spring. That changes from year to year, but that's kind of a timeline that we've seen historically. And then once the application comes out, it's a 60-day turnaround time. So sometimes 90, I think the past couple of years it's been 60. So just to kind of give you an idea. And again, it doesn't change a lot from year to year. So this is a great opportunity today to see if this is something you're interested in. And there are lots of steps you can take now to prep for when this application does come out.
And Shannon, if I could add, we often talk about, the minimum you mentioned is 50,000 and it goes up to $1 million, and then you provide your match as the applicant. The level of burden to apply, the actual effort it takes you to apply is pretty much the same, whether it's 50,000 or $1 million. So like you said earlier, shoot big, you know, think outside the box. Technology that you all need in your organizations, you need a lot of different types of technology, more today than ever, probably. So really let us help you think outside the box, unless you already have that taken care of and you have a big idea of some things that you need to do. But just think about the fact that the level of burden, the level of effort to pursue this application is the same if you ask for a little bit of money or a lot of money.
Thank you, Kristen. Yes, that's
Sure.
a great point. And then so what can you get? So eligible expenditures really, so this is a capital grant. They're really looking at, again, that equipment that's going to facilitate that live interactive component, whether it be for distance learning or telemedicine. And that includes basically, you know, the hard equipment itself, the infrastructure, devices, wiring that need to go along with that, licensing, you know, warranty, maintenance, et cetera. And then up to 20% of the budget typically has been eligible for broadband if you need that connectivity. Remote instruction, excuse me, as long as it's a capital expenditure, and then technical assistance can be 10% of the budget. So again, nothing that would be considered human resources, overhead, staff, et cetera, really just looking at the equipment and kind of the infrastructure around that. So ineligible, real quick, just go ahead, Kristen.
I'm sorry to interrupt you again.
Yeah,
I just
okay.
wanted to let everybody know that something else that we have seen that has been approved is some cybersecurity attached to your solution. So while, you know, the point is made really well here that it's a capital expenditure grant, some of the types of things you need to protect that capital investment, like cybersecurity, because of the way that that's advancing, negatively advancing and impacting so many organizations. That's actually been approved on a lot of applications that we've seen. So I just want to point that out. Cybersecurity can also be included.
Thank you. So yeah, so what's not eligible, salaries like we touched on, you know, anything related to kind of staffing would not be allowable. Recurring expenses, operational costs, et cetera, supplies. So nothing indirect, and then no evaluation costs. And there really is not, you know, in terms of reporting on the back end, there is not the need for a formal evaluator. So wouldn't need to build that in. And then unrelated technology purposes. So, you know, this is not a grant where you'd want to include lots of, you know, Chromebooks, or even, you know, desktop, something like that. You can certainly build in some of that to support the infrastructure of that live interactive video conferencing type of equipment. But again, not large quantities of that type of thing. And then again, you know, as you get into building budget, we can answer more questions about that. And then real quick, so project design. So just kind of the terms that we're going to throw out there, you know, we have hubs and then we have spokes, end users, hub end users. So I'll just quickly kind of go over that. And then again, we can answer questions specific to your project. But so a hub is basically, that's where the content is being provided from. That's where you have perhaps as an instructor, a professor, a physician, nurse, you know, whatever that may be, but that's the person who's going to provide the resource to the end user. And then the so one design would be where you have a hub, just purely you get one location, and then you have these end users. So an example of that is basically the medical center that's connecting specialists to some of those smaller locations. The second example that we have up here is the hub end user to hub end user. So sometimes you'll have hubs. So perhaps if you are a school district that you want to offer, you know, maybe a French class, but you can't necessarily recruit a French instructor to your school district, you could partner with another district that has that resource, and then maybe you provide the Spanish, you know, instructor that you have to them. So it's kind of a two-way street. So in that scenario, you know, the location is considered a hub end user, because not only are you receiving content, you're also sharing content. And so that's scored a little bit differently. And that's something, you know, we can get into as we cover the scoring piece of this. And a couple other examples of how you can kind of set up your project and how that impacts scoring. The third is non-fixed. So this would be occasionally you'll have a hub site that provides services to a location that's not fixed. So for example, a visiting nurse service. And this gets a little more complicated, in terms of scoring, because really the idea of this grant is they want to make sure that that rural end user is being served that has the economic need, and that's the pocket where the equipment stays. So this would be an example that you could offer something like this where you have a scenario where the person is actually out visiting in the community. And then in that case, the home health agency would be the hub. And then the fourth example is a hybrid. And again, these are not ones that we see as often because the scoring is a little more complicated, but sometimes you'll have fixed and non-fixed. And again, we could get more into that as you have specific examples. And then just real quick, so types of projects, and the kind of the fun part of this grant for me, at least, is brainstorming with organizations. So you might again have the example of the foreign language teacher, but then you can kind of keep building on that as you have ideas. And every community is unique, and the need for every whether it be school or medical center is unique. So, school to school, again, we touched on that. That's pretty straightforward. But then maybe school to health center. So you might have a need for school-based health, or even, we're seeing a lot of mental health counseling, mental health wellness needs, not just for students, but for faculty and staff as well. Schools to higher ed. So maybe you have a dual credit opportunity, or career tech. That's also another thing we see in a lot of rural locations, is the need for some career tech programs. And so this would offer the opportunity to really connect with any type of business to provide that, or specific skill trade. Higher ed to higher ed. So again, you could connect satellite campuses this way to expand the course offerings. Libraries and community centers. I actually worked with a large state university that connected with community centers throughout their state last year for a successful project. So that's another resource to kind of keep in mind, or even senior centers. The medical center to clinics. So you would have a specialist, and then again in rural areas sometimes it's hard to recruit those specialists. So it's a great opportunity to connect with some of those clinics. And again, there are a few more on here, but I know we just, in the interest of time, Victoria needs to get started on the scoring piece. So you can kind of read through those, and again, just let the wheels start turning.
If I could just add another thing that we see, and that they did at Lisbon, and the school district that's going to be joining us tomorrow, New London in Ohio, is some career pathing. So connecting to organizations in the region that are stakeholders, or places where the students may be looking for careers. So career pathing is another real common conversation and application that we have in our applicant pool.
And again, these are all just some examples. We see really exciting new projects, project designs every year that combine different components together. So it's really a broad grant in terms of what falls under distance learning and what falls under telemedicine. So really, really cool. Now, switching gears a little bit into the scoring, first I wanted to give you just a high-level view of what we're going to be talking about today. So the grant application has all these different components that you have to put in there. We are going to spend most of our time today on this objective scoring bit. So we're going to really look at what is meant by virality, what is meant by economic need, how do you calculate that, how do you determine which of your sites, if you maybe are a school district with multiple schools, which of your sites are going to be competitive for this funding. And then we're going to look at the special considerations. These are basically like focus areas for the grant that can shift from year to year, but something for you to definitely consider when you're thinking about applying. Tomorrow is going to be all about subjective scoring. And then also tomorrow we'll take a look at some of these other sections, of a little bit more of a high level view. There's sections that are required but not scored. You want to take some time there, but definitely as far as what you're going to have to write, subjective scoring is where you really want to focus. And as far as planning your project, figuring out a good objective score is where you want to focus too, and figuring out the sites and partners that are going to be make the most effective and the most competitive project. So getting into the objective scoring, we're going to start, again, kind of, I guess, high level. You're probably going to be calculating the objective score kind of throughout your planning process. So, finding the right sites and finding the right partners is something you'll probably have to tweak a little bit as you're putting your project together. And the two big things, rurality and economic need, those are going to be kind of the key things to consider, and special considerations as well. Again, we'll get to that in just a sec. But Essentially, you'll probably have to crunch the numbers a few times, and maybe there's some sites that you see wouldn't be necessarily as competitive maybe as end user sites, but maybe you can still have them in your project as hub sites, as sites providing services. And sometimes you just got to calculate your score and see what you end up with and see if that's competitive. And that's something that our team is happy to help with as well. We can let you know, traditionally what we typically see as a competitive project, because that shifts from state to state depending on the demographics of the area. And then, it might be a matter of maybe adding a few sites or subtracting a few sites to try to bump up your score if possible. So starting with the Virality. So Virality historically has been based on the 2010 census. Well, I say historically, for the last 10 years or so. But we do recommend they've completed the population information for the 2020 census. We don't have the guidelines yet for the latest, 2022 program, but we would recommend using the 2020 census when you're, doing your estimates. It's probably the one that's going to be used for the future program. But keep in mind the 2020 census is new. The layout is a little bit different from what we've seen before. So what we're going to show you today, just keep in mind this is maybe subject to change a little bit when the actual program comes out, and you always want to reference the actual guidance to make sure that they are using the 2020 census and not something else. But again, we're going to make some assumptions just for the purposes of taking you through this exercise today. Now, I'm going to just walk you through all of this. So we're going to do a real live demo of this, but just keep in mind the deck is going to have this information for you as well. But in terms of looking this up, so I have the website pulled up here. This is the 2020 census for population data. And what the RUS DLT grant cares about when determining virality is the population information for the town, city, or census designated place where the site is located. So to find that, what we have to do is we have to click right here where it says geos, and then we have to go to place. And the example I have, let's take a look at Idaho, and we're going to pick here American Falls City in Idaho. Keep in mind there used to be a nice little search feature where you can type in the name of the city. We don't have that yet on the 2020 census website, but again, maybe that's something that will be updated for the future. But just for simplicity, we're going to pick that one. Some things happen behind the scenes, so then we're going to close this out. And you get a lot of data here. So the thing we want is the total population for that town. So what I recommend is collapsing, I guess minimizing this population, this race information, because that's not what's key for us. What's key for us is this total number. So 4,568, that would count as the population of, again, this town or city, and that is what we want to consider for our scoring. So for now, just note that this is the, the population information for this town or city. Again, we'll get into the details of what exactly this means. Is this competitive? But this is how you look up this population information in the census website. Now, another key thing for virality, so that is one crucial component, but something that they've introduced in the last couple of years is that even if the town or city that you're looking at has a small population of, let's say under 5,000 people, they want to also make sure that you are not then close to another town or city that has a larger population of over 50,000. That is considered a, an urban town or city. So they want to make sure, again, not only that your population is small, but that you're not, within a short driving distance of a larger town or city. So for that, they've actually developed a map, which we're going to take a look at here. And basically, yellow areas on this map are going to be those large kind of urban areas, or are close enough to large urban areas that basically anything in the yellow would not be an eligible end user site, because it is considered urban adjacent and not rural enough for this program. It could be maybe a great hub site, but it's not going to be a great end user site. And I have an example here. So let me just take this address, and we're going to see this in real life. So this is Sparkman High School in Harvest, Alabama. real quick, so the population of Harvest, Alabama, if we were just looking at it on the census website I just showed you, is 5,893 people, which is pretty rural. It would be seemingly great for this program. But the other step that we want to go through is we want to take a look at this map and see if it's close enough, again, to another large town or city. I did not build the suspense well. It's going to be close to another large town or city. But here, let's take a look. So this high school, okay, we see is located in the yellow. And let's just zoom out a little bit so you can get a better sense of what exactly is going on here. So we are in, you know, this town here, Harvest, but it is actually also very close to Huntsville, Alabama, and Huntsville, Alabama has a way larger population. So you see here, essentially, this school is considered urban adjacent, and again, is not going to be an effective end user site in this project. If it was just outside of the yellow, it could potentially be. So it's a, you know, it's an interesting system they've set up. You know, maybe in the future, the way this map works will change, but this is just how it is for now. You want to be outside of the yellow in order to be a competitive end user site. So that's another bit of the rurality. Now let's shift gears a little bit and take a look at economic need. So economic need is also something that you're going to look up on the census website. We're just going to use a different table. We're going to look at SAPE, which stands for Small Area Income and Poverty Estimates. And I'll take you through the lookup tool in just a moment. But basically, SAPE is a county level measure. So that's an interesting thing to remember. The population is based on the population, as we said, of the town, city, or census designated place. SAPE is going to take all of the county information into consideration. And what it looks at is the percentage of people in all age groups in that county who live in poverty. There's slightly different SAPE information that you can get, but the one that we want for this application is, again, all ages, people, percentage of people in poverty in that county. So let's take a look at what this looks like if we were to look up the SAPE. So just having a little delay. Okay, so the SAPE website is here. It also has some, you know, really handy, awesome filtering. So if you take a look right here, you can filter by state, and then you can also filter by county if relevant. So what we're going to do, just for an example, let's take a look at New Mexico. Now, let's say we wanted to look at all the counties in New Mexico, because maybe we were, you know, in an early stage of planning our project and we want to find competitive counties, competitive partners for this project. So you can always just filter by the state. You scroll down here and you're going to see all of the SAPE scores for all of the counties in that state. And the key thing for us is this table here, this column, percent in poverty. And you can see it for all the counties. If you like, you can kind of, you know, go through page by page, or you can download this right here and download a, you know, CSV file of that data and go through it that way. Now, let's say, you know, maybe you don't want to see all the counties in that state. You have a particular county in mind, you have a particular site in mind that you're trying to score. So let's look up specifically, we're going to look at Luna County. So that's going to give you just the results of Luna County. And again, this is the column that's relevant to us. It's all going to be the same data. There's just some useful, you know, again, filtering depending on what you're trying to do. You probably don't need to download this one, but if it's maybe a larger list that you're looking at, so like all the SAPE scores in that state, you might want to download it. It might be easier for you to go through it that way. Now, jumping ahead a little bit, because we looked at the SAPE example. So special considerations. I've been saying, you know, special considerations are also something to think about when it comes to the objective score. With every RUS DLT cycle, there's certain program focuses that they put forth, and these are called special considerations. Now, these will typically change. They're subject to change from year to year. What we usually see is that a special consideration category will stick around for a few years. And as sort of, the focuses and goals of the administration might change, or, the needs of the larger, of the US in general might change, you might see different special considerations pop up here. But this first one here, so these are the special considerations from the last cycle, from 2021. One of them was for any project where the main goal is regarding, the treatment, counseling, training, or educational services for opioid or other substance use disorder. You would have received 10 points, 10 extra points on your objective score, in addition to your rurality and economic need points, if that was the main purpose of your project. And this special consideration category, the opioid or substance use disorder, treatment, counseling, etc., we've seen this be a special consideration category for the last few years. So, just so you know, this one stuck around for a few years now. Now, this other one, where you would get 20 points if you had at least one end user site located on tribal lands. Just keep in mind, if you were a non-tribal applicant, you needed to get a tribal resolution with the tribe in order to claim these points in your application. This is it was introduced last year. We've actually seen this special consideration category also in years past, but not in the last few years. This was something new that was introduced last year. So simply put, we do have to wait and see when the 2022 guidelines come out. This is one of the first things our team usually looks at, is what are the special considerations for this year. There's a good chance these two might stick around. So again, when you're thinking of project design and potential project partners, there again, good chance you might get some extra points for these two areas, but these can also change. For instance, we've seen STEM was a focus the last few years up until 2021. So if your project was looking at anything regarding STEM, so with telemedicine and distance learning, there was a lot you can do regarding STEM education, continued medical education, etc. That was a big special consideration category. So anyway, we'll have to see what these are for this year, but you do want to try to claim these points if possible. Every point matters. So if your project can potentially meet one of these special considerations, we do encourage you to, try to think of your project design in a way that you can actually claim these points. Now, moving on, so I talked about the how. Now, what does this actually mean for your score? So let's take a look at all of this. So the first bit, we talked about rurality. As you can see here, for your objective score, rurality is weighed the heaviest. You can get up to 40 points for rurality. And the way that you get points for this rurality category is, you see there's different levels essentially. You get the most points if the site is located in a town or city that is considered exceptionally rural, which means it is a population of 5,000 people or under. So that town we were looking at, it was American Falls City in Idaho. It had a population of, I believe, around 4,800. That would fall into this category, and that would get the most points, again, which is 40 points. And then it goes down, so you get 30 points if the population is between 5,000 and 10,000 people, should say 5,001. Mid-rural area, you get 20 points, that is population of over 10,000 and up to 20,000. And then anything beyond 20,000 is considered an urban area, and you would not get any points for that. So that would not be a good end user site for your project, but potentially could be a good hub site if it's based in a town or city of population over 20. And as I'm sure you're starting to see now, again, it's about trying to get your overall score into a competitive, effective level. So you can potentially have, maybe a couple mid-rural area sites in your project, as long as you have maybe a lot more exceptionally rural areas in your project, because the way it's done is this score is averaged across all of your end user sites. And also, if you have hub/end user sites, they factor into this score as well. So basically, any site that is receiving services or content of some kind counts for the scoring. So as long as your average is pretty good, again, you can have a few sites that are in, slightly bigger towns or cities. You just want to make sure you're competitive overall. Very similar thing for economic need. So economic need here, it again is based on that SAFE score. So it's based on the percentage of people who live in poverty in that county. And you can also get a lot of points here, but it's weighed slightly less than rurality. You can get up to 30 points for economic need. And these are the buckets again. So if the SAFE score is over 30% in that county, you can claim the maximum points, which is 30 points. If that SAFE score is between 20 and 30, you get 20 points. And then SAFE between 10 and 20, you get 10 points. SAFE percentage under 10% would be 0 points. And again, you do all this first for all of your sites, just like the rurality, and then it's averaged across all the end user sites. So all the sites that are receiving content or services. And this is one in particular that really, really varies from area to area. So for instance, I cover the westernmost states for our organization. So I look at Alaska, the Pacific Northwest, California, the Southwest, and Hawaii. And I'll say, for instance, for the Pacific Northwest, there's very few counties that have a high SAFE score. I think in Washington State, there might not even be any counties that have a SAFE over 20. So that's something that you're going to see in certain states where, maybe the SAFE is just maxed out at 20%. There just aren't any counties that have SAFE over 20%. You're competing for this grant because it is a federal grant. You're competing nationwide, but they do want to have, a fair distribution of where these funds end up. So that's to say, that doesn't mean that they're never going to fund a project from Washington State, for instance. We see projects funded in Washington State all the time because they do still consider, how competitive is the score for, the larger area that you're in. And if there's a certain point where you just can't get a higher SAFE score in this state, no matter what it just is what it is. That's okay. That doesn't mean you're not going to get funded, but you do want to try to, max that out if possible. So maybe try to get a lot of sites that will get at least 10 points so that you can at least get those, 10 points. Maybe you can't get over 20 points. It's just not possible for you. But again, try to make it as competitive as possible with what you can do. And again, the last bit, special considerations, I know we just talked about this, but key thing to keep in mind is these, you can only claim these points once per project. So for instance, like last year, let's say your project both had, counseling services for substance use disorder and also had a site on tribal land, and you were able to get a tribal resolution with the tribe. You could only get these points once, so it would be to your advantage to claim the tribal points because those are 20 versus 10. But I would argue, for anything, like if your project can still hit both of these categories, you still want to talk about that in your project narrative. So again, that's something we're going to talk about tomorrow. In your project narrative, you really want to highlight all of the needs of your community and how your project is going to address those needs. So that's only going to bump up that project narrative score if you can, highlight additional needs and additional benefits to your project. So even though you can only claim these special consideration points once in the objective part, it's great if your project hits multiple categories. And again, that just gives you more to discuss in your narrative. So that is everything I wanted to go through. I know that was a lot of information. So we, want to take some time here to answer any questions that you might have. And again, we're going to be providing this content to you. So if you want to, maybe try scoring some potential sites, if you want to come tomorrow with some questions on how the scoring works, or just reach out afterwards, we're happy to go through any of this with you. So you just let us know. And thank you from our side, for anyone who wants to drop. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Victoria. I'm such a nerd. I love that kind of level of detail. I was typing with Stephanie, and we keep talking about how it's this puzzle and you have to try to fit the puzzle pieces together. But it may, to those of you who are joining who've listened to all of that, think, ugh, that's a lot to kind of absorb, or that's a lot to try to figure out. Just know that we help with that. You know, all of us that are on this call, that's what we love to do. And all we really need to start that process is your street address. We just need the street address of the locations that are involved, and we can go do all of that sort of lookup and fitting the puzzle pieces together and give you a preliminary score. So we kind of do a, here's what it looks like. This looks like how competitive you might be prior to applying. And because most of us here have experience since the inception of this program in 1994, 28 years ago, we know what's competitive. So we can tell you, hey, you could maybe beef up your score a little bit if you do this, or this site you need to just drop off because it's not really good, it's too urban. Or if that site's a hub only, you can include it, but it needs to strictly be a hub only, delivering services. And the other thing I'll say is that the main goal of this program is to increase access to education and healthcare. If you remember nothing else, it's about increasing access to education and healthcare, because these rural places obviously lack a lot of access simply because of their geography and their ability to reach these resources that aren't there because no one lives there. But when you heard Joe talking, he talked about his city in Ohio that has about 5,000 people. He was just under the threshold. And his school district, he was able to put in technology into multiple classrooms. So you're looking at, you know, anywhere from 20 to 30 different rooms that he could put technology in so that the students, the staff, and the community could reach and have access to healthcare and education, behavioral health, mental health, even primary care for school-based health. So we went through those things. Thank you both very much, Shannon, Victoria, and everybody from the Poly team and the LDA group. This is what we do all day, every week, every month, every year, is focus on this and other funding sources to try to break down that puzzle for you. So we hope you enjoyed it. It was recorded. You will get a copy of the presentation. We have another guest speaker tomorrow when we go over the subjective scoring, which is also really fun, in my opinion, because you talk about the ways that this program can help impact your community positively. So we hope you enjoyed it. I'll give you back a few minutes of your day because I don't see that we have any questions. And thank you all for attending, and thank you so much to the LDA team for doing that marvelous presentation.